Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. My name is Suzanne Sherman. I'll be your host for the next hour here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Jeff Johnson is manning the controls here, producing the show in our cyber studio here. Thank you very much, Jeff. We'll be bringing you in momentarily after you've gotten all the levels and everything working. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and remind you, follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We also have a fan page. You're welcome to join us there, CRN, and you can join in our discussions and debates. We have a lot of stuff going on there, and we have some really cool stuff going on. This show's been on a bit of a hiatus between my minor illness, had me under the weather last week, and Jeff's work schedule and hunting schedule. But fear not, Daniel Bailey, one of the founders of the network, had his show last week, the Bailey Report. So he returned. That is up on our Radio Co. list. You can find our Radio Co. on our fan page here and our regular network page on Facebook. And you can go right to an app and listen. We've got material, live content, not live content, recorded content, live when we are live, 24/7. There's always something. Jeff Johnson did his show, The Paradigm Shift, yesterday. Welcome back, Jeff. That was awesome. And let's see, we had the Mark and Suzanne show. We did that last week as well. We will be going live tomorrow, I assume. If Mark Kreslins is unavailable, I will do another episode of the Wasatch Report. As it is, I've got about 4 hours of material that we're going to do what we can in 1 hour today. So it'll be nice to have more time tomorrow. And either way, we will have a lot of stuff, regardless of whether it is me and Mark or me flying solo. We have podcasts from Mike Meharry from the 10th Amendment Center. Want to encourage you to join and support the 10th Amendment Center as well. Speaking of the 10th Amendment Center, they just recently published my article last week. I wrote this in response to the passing of Proposition 2 out here in Utah, and there's a lot of drama going on about that. The legislator has modified the version that the people voted on, but again, that is within the authority and purview of them to do. But on a wider perspective, one of the warnings I have been issuing has been the fact that we are still in contravention to federal firearms and marijuana laws. And while Prop 2 actually says that Utah's state resources cannot be used to enforce federal laws, what's being left out is the fact that, and I asked Connor Boyack, the moving force behind Prop 2, will the states interpose as opposed to just nullify federal laws and actually step in to protect law-abiding gun owners in the state of Utah? Because as I mentioned in this article, according to an ATF transaction record that you have to sign in application 4473, you are admonished that if you are using marijuana or in possession of marijuana lawfully within your state, you will be turned down if you seek to purchase a firearm. When I asked Connor about this, he said, well, you can certainly go around an FFL and get a private one, but I submit to you, you are still violating federal law. So I would like to have some states stand up and say, look, if you are lawful within our Constitution, our sovereign territories, we will protect you. That did not happen in the state of Kentucky. I refer you to the issue with Kim Davis, where she upheld her sworn duty to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Kentucky. The citizens of that state overwhelmingly voted that marriage would be between one man, one woman. A politically connected lawyer in his black government-issued costume, part of the federal judiciary, struck that down and said, nope, you cannot do that. When she refused to comply, she was put into custody for contempt. Now, what I had said at the time was the people of Kentucky should have stood up, and the law in Kentucky should have been an intervention, interposed, and prevented her from going into custody. So that being said, I'd refer you to that article in the 10th Amendment Center. Even if you do not support medical marijuana. Again, one of the problems is if you even possess it, if you're transporting it to a family member, you're going to even lawfully, ostensibly be denied the right to even purchase ammunition. So please refer to that article. Another feather in my cap last week, I was very humbled when I went to the event in Dallas, the symposium on nullification and secession. Dr. Donald Livingston himself asked me to write an article on what we were talking about at dinner with the group, about what I refer to as the malfeasance of the legal education industry. And he asked me to write that article. And when Don Livingston asks you to write an article, you write the article. Anyway, on December 5th, that came out from the Abbeville Institute. It's called The Problem with Lawyers and the Constitution. I would ask you to read that if you're not familiar with my stance on that as well. Something really cool as Thomas DeLorenzo cited that and included that in the Lou Rockwell blog. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, we're going to discuss prepping and politics today, my favorite combination. And I know Jeff likes to talk about that as well. He's a fellow prepper. In fact, I think he's even a better prepper than I am. I'm kind of the radio personality prepper, but I really respect all the stuff he has done in that regard. Jeff, are you ready to jump in the show with us here?
Oh, certainly. Everything's running great this morning, so I don't know. I'm not touching anything right now.
Awesome. Well, I want to welcome, I know Andrew Avery, our good friend in Pennsylvania, is listening live. And Dave Benner, a good friend that was, we did a new episode of Case in Point, by the way, on Monday. That's up and available on SoundCloud. Yay, all the way up to episode 3. Way to crank out those episodes, Suzanne. But episode 3, we discussed McDonald versus the city of Chicago. Why I brought Dave Benner in on this is he is the author of one of my, this is just the book on the incorporation doctrine. It is titled The 14th Amendment and the Incorporation Doctrine. It is just a small booklet, excuse me, for about 40 pages. You can read this and in about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, know more about the constitutional intent and limitations than the justices on the United States Supreme Court. I'm not kidding you. Also, Compact of the Republic is another book we discussed on that show that he wrote that explains very, very well the history behind the fact that 13 sovereign and independent nations came together to form a voluntary union. From that, you can surmise the illegitimacy of incorporating the Bill of Rights against the states. And you can also understand the illegitimacy of saying secession is illegal, particularly when people like to cite Texas versus White. So I really urge you to purchase those 2 books, not only for yourself, but for family members. It's the time to get stuff. So share the gift of knowledge. Speaking of the gift of knowledge, also Liberty Classroom. Go to the checkout counter, CRN, and you can give a membership for $49 from $89. I have no financial affiliation with Liberty Classroom. I just like to share information that ultimately will benefit us all. So, Jeff, when recently there was a very large earthquake in Alaska, and I'm sure you're familiar with the photos we saw all over the place. What really struck out in my mind was that car that was on a roadway, and it was just surrounded by just fissures in the earth, and these people in this car had nowhere to go. Do you recall that?
I do recall that. I remember seeing the pictures and all the other stuff of the cars down in where the road had collapsed. I mean, it was numerous places.
And I think about this because, again, living out here in the mountains and even people that are on the freeways in the urban areas, how many times have we seen these urban areas where people are on freeways and they are literally stranded in their cars for hours? If it's a hurricane, if it's a blizzard, out here on the 80-84 interchange, I know you've traveled on that when you've come to this area. We were heading east one summer. We were in our motorhome, so we had a restroom, we had food, we were able to keep ourselves cool. But there was a massive semi crash. I think it was a fuel tanker slammed into the back of a semi carrying batteries. Both sides of the freeway were completely shut down. As we were headed towards Evanston, there were semis lined up all the way to the horizon, and they were turning them back, and they had to all park at Little America. And I thought, what if you were stuck out here in the winter like that at night, just in a vehicle? Well, lo and behold, I think it was last winter, there was a 30-car pileup in the black ice. And I think this time they were headed east, but they were stuck there at night for hours. So keeping this in mind, the Alaska issue kind of inspired me to go through my emergency bag in my vehicle. Jeff, I know you have one as well. Ask yourself, now it's wintertime. We can talk more about the summer specific ones when the season rolls around. But what would happen if you were stuck in your vehicle overnight in very cold weather? How would you survive? So I went through my bag, Jeff. I made sure that we had the tarps. I have an emergency bivouac there from Survival Frog. It's kind of a cool thing, but I have jackets in there, a wool cap. Think about how quickly your head will lose heat. What if the structural integrity of your vehicle is compromised and you can't stay warm? I have tarps and duct tape if we have to seal off a window, something like that. And one of the things, you and I were playing around with this little gizmo when you were out here, and it's called a barrow cook. And this fit just perfectly in my backpack. It's a flameless cooking system. It actually has a packet, and within that, you fill up the certain amount of water that you want, and then you empty this chemical packet, you put it in the base, and then in this base, a stainless steel bowl sits on top of this, and there's a chemical reaction that will even boil water if you need to purify water. So I threw that with a set of spoons in my backpack, as well as, for me, for an overnight trip, if you need it, a can of chunky soup. I'm no fan of chunky soup. I don't eat it regularly, but if it's an emergency and you don't want to deal with the can opener, they have those pop-off tops, and you've got a meal. If you're going to be in the car overnight, this could make a big difference. Also have water on hand so you can use this piece of equipment as well, also to keep yourself hydrated. So again, think about what you have in your vehicle. Imagine you're having to spend the night in it. This is another reason why I always like to keep my fuel tank topped off at night, so you can, or in your car. So if you have to spend the night in there or hours in the cold, you can keep your heater running intermittently. So that's just always been a favorite topic of mine, talking about preparedness, vehicle preparedness, that sort of thing. And it really, I see reminders of it all the time out here, especially in the winter with the ice. And you've been having some of that situation as well out there with that kind of weather, right?
Yes, we have. You got to go through your bags and periodically make sure that whatever you have in there, especially with this freezing weather now, that can of chunky could end up being all over inside your bag because it froze. I mean, so, you got to think about that, your water and assess other things as well during these winter months, and being prepared for whatever weather that you're going to encounter this time of year.
And that's a great point, because if you just leave your bag in the vehicle out here, the can will freeze, the water will freeze, and it's not going to be much use to you. So it's just one more little inconvenience we have out here in the wintertime, where, I've got to carry this bag back and forth in and out of my house, because, you get in a situation like that. Oh, gosh darn it, let me get my chunky soup. Well, it's an ice cube right now. So something else to think about. Also, I went through my flashlights, and surprise, surprise, some of them needed new batteries. The time to figure that out is before you actually need them. That's kind of the point of being prepared. So speaking of preparedness, we found a pretty cool article on off-grid survival, and it's called, and this just came out December 10th. It says DHS says Americans need to start prepping for up to 6 months without electricity. Jeff, I'm a little bit confused. I'm wondering if this is the same DHS that said anybody with more than 3 days or a week or two of food is a domestic terrorist, has a potential to be a domestic terrorist. So which one do you think it is, or do we even care?
I don't care what they think, but it was a different administration too, so we have to take that into account.
That's a fair assessment. I think these deep state ABC agencies really don't change regardless of the administration, and we've seen a bit of that with President Trump. Oh, you know what? My bad. I wanted to start with another story before we got into this article. Let's talk about, and you mentioned this already before, the issue in New Jersey, because this is a big deal. You know, we started talking about protecting lawful gun owners when we had conflicts from state marijuana laws, state firearms laws with federal laws. There's a case, a firearms related case coming out of New Jersey, and you can find an article on this on Breitbart. This came out the other day. At issue is high capacity magazines. These are a no-no in California as well. They frown upon them. Governor Phil Murphy signed a ban on magazines holding over 10 rounds in June. It takes effect on December 11th. When the clock strikes midnight, anyone in New Jersey who owns a magazine capable of holding more than 10 rounds of ammunition is officially in possession of illegal contraband and is deemed a fourth-degree felon. And this is a problem with these gun laws. They take law-abiding, honest, decent citizens and by nothing other than legislative fiat, turn them into felons. Felons, if you're convicted of this, what happens if you are a felon, non-violent or otherwise? You are prohibited under federal law from owning, possessing, even touching a firearm for the rest of your life. Unlike previous magazine bans, this one retroactively bans people from even owning these magazines in your home, even if they had been purchased legally. Okay, this is a state ban. Once again, these gun rights activists go, and I know people cheer them on, and they always get mad at me when I go off on this tangent. The ban was challenged in federal court, United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. They upheld the ban. And to the dismay of my followers, I said, well, the court got it right. A three-judge panel from the three-judge panel from the Third Circuit voted 2-1 to uphold the ban. I think the hardest thing about radio is you have to think and talk at the same time. Judge Stephen Bibas, a Trump appointee, said the panel who voted against was a panel judge who voted against the ban. He argued that the ruling treats the Second Amendment as protecting second-class rights, unequal with other rights. Here's the problem. We have a Trump appointee who doesn't understand federalism. This is the problem. This is a state firearms law. According to the Second Amendment, the federal government has been prohibited from regulating firearms at all. Refer you to my show, Case in Point, with Dave Benner, where we explain that this is wrong according to the Constitution as ratified. You might find this law, as I do, highly distasteful, but it is within the purview of the state's retained rights to regulate firearms. That is the 10th Amendment. So, Jeff, this is the problem. People don't like what a state law has to offer. They come down with something draconian like they do in the case here of New Jersey or California. They run to the federal judiciary. I try to warn people, you're really rolling the dice, because ultimately the Supreme Court will rule on this and say, yeah, these bans are entirely constitutional. What happens when they have a nationwide ban on these? You think that's not possible? You really do? What happened with bump stocks? Don't you think it's similarly possible for a nationwide decree that all of a sudden anybody that owns a magazine, pick your level of rounds. Right now it's 10, maybe it could be 5. These guys are talking 1. How many do you need to shoot a deer? That's completely irrelevant. Keep it in the states where you have some options. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, here's the deal with this thing. New Jersey sucks. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I lived there. I grew up there, went to school there, but New Jersey sucks. Here's why. Article 1 of their Constitution, rights and privileges. States and privileges. You got to love when they say privileges. Mm-hmm. Their Article 1, Section 1. and I've never seen the older versions of this because I think it was redone in 1947. But I'm going to guess that this Article 1 had different wording at one point in time. But it says, all persons are by nature free and independent and have certain natural and unalienable rights, among which are those enjoying and defending life and liberty of acquiring, possessing, protecting property, and of pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. I'm going to bet at one time there were gun rights involved in that one, and they took it out. So here's where I'm going with this. So now there is, if you read their Constitution, there's no protection of your right to keep and bear arms anywhere in it. So federalism means that states can suck. Pennsylvania has a very good article that defends your right to keep and bear arms. From the state, it's a protection of the people from the state. It's not granting the right. You have the right. Now, in all reality, the people of New Jersey, you have a natural right. They don't have the ability to take it away. But to defend that right, you now take the chance of becoming a felon. If they catch you with these, you're now a felon.
This is why jury nullification is so important. If you are sitting on a jury and you're sitting before a case like this, you should recognize that this is just immoral and vote, as is your right, to acquit. We need to learn more about jury nullification. You're really rolling the dice. If you get caught, what are the odds that you're going to have a juror stand up for you and nullify a conviction? However, education is key, and that's all we can do at this point. Or you can also move. I was certainly not going to count on jury nullification in California, so I left. California's got no provision for firearms in its constitution. The one in Utah is essentially useless. It says that we have that right, but the legislature has every authority to rule on it. So that's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, that being said, let's get back to this DHS article. But I think I'm glad we did cover that, because that was something that I wanted to do. So we have a new report now that comes out, and this is again from the Off-Grid Survival website. New report from the President's National, pardon my French, Infrastructure Advisory Council, published by DHS. The government is urging the public to prepare for up to 6 months without electricity, transportation, fuel money, and health care. Already done that. But it's surprising that they're actually coming out and advocating this. Why would they do that? Are they admitting that they can't do it for us? What about FEMA? How much money goes into FEMA? What about healthcare? Wait a minute. We have now, thanks to Obamacare, it's free pretty much for everybody, or everybody's pretty much been kicked into the plan. And here they all saying, well, we know we took it over, but we might not be able to provide it. So just in case, after all this redistribution of wealth, be prepared to be on your own. Do you remember, Jeff, I did a show on the old network with Dr. Joe Alton. He's a absolute celebrity in the survival and preparedness world. He's also known as Dr. Bones. He has a website called Doom and Gloom Survival, or Doom and Bloom. I'll look it up. Anyway, and we did a show about taking care of, he has a book on the subject, about over 90% of medical issues you come across, you can actually treat yourself. So we're going to show that the link for that book as well. DHS is warning that the electric grid is now the prime target of terrorists, and says Americans need to be prepared for a power outage of up to 6 months. Jeff, you and I watched that movie when you were here last year, earlier this spring, called American Blackout. You can see it on YouTube. It was played by National Geographic originally, and it showed what happened. I think it was the grid was down for just a period of 10 days. And it was a very realistic presentation of the chaos that ensues when people are absolutely unprepared to deal with such an issue. The article says here that the report says that people no longer keep enough essentials within their homes, reducing the ability to sustain themselves during an extended, prolonged outage. And we need to improve individual preparedness. And there's a report that's actually hyperlinked in this article. It's a PDF, and you can read that. It's called Surviving a Catastrophic Power Outage. It warns that an attack would likely come with little to no notice and could cause complete chaos for at least a half a year. Long duration, lasting several weeks to months, due to physical destruction of equipment such as transformers, transmission lines. There's the severity of the event resulting in limited workforce to repair damage or inability to create or transport, replacement parts. Jeff, think about it. How long would it take? I think there was a show called On the Record that talked about the vulnerability of our power grid. We don't manufacture these parts here anymore. How would we get them over here? How would people transport themselves to even get this up and running? I think it would just be a monumental feat to get this all done. So imagine now, all of a sudden you're without power. You can't get money out of the ATM. The trucks aren't going to be able to make deliveries to the stores, even if you could pay cash. What is going to happen? How would your life be if all of a sudden you could not resupply or go where you need to go? The report recommends Americans have enough supplies on hand for a minimum of 14 days, a number that seems grossly inadequate now, given what they've said here. What they're also explaining is this profound risk requires a new focus. Significant public and private action is needed to prepare for and recover from a catastrophic outage that could leave large parts of the nation without power for weeks or months and cause service failures in other sectors, including water, wastewater, communications, transportation, healthcare, financial services that are critical to public health and safety and our security, national and economic. Jeff, we talk about this all the time. How much food do you have on hand? How much water do you have on hand? If, assuming you run out of water, how can you acquire more? Are you near a water source? Can you purify your water? You know, we've seen after the earthquake in Alaska, people had water available to them in their plumbing, but they said it was undrinkable. So they couldn't even use that water. So it doesn't matter where you are. This stuff applies to everybody. It can be an EMP. It could be a severe storm. It can be an earthquake. Pick your calamity. But Jeff, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be ready in the event this happens.
Yes, and this article is actually very good. It kind of gives you a breakdown of what you should have on hand, and it has some ideas. And I'm sure we're going to get to that in a minute. But they're talking about a terrorist attack, but really, when it comes down to it, our sun could do this to us as well. We could have a corneal mass ejection that would bombard the earth and fry all electronics, your computers, your phones. A lot of cars wouldn't run. There's some discussion as to actually how many, what a percentage. But, and matter of fact, remember you had, Dr. Arthur Bradley on? And he has a book on EMPs?
I was just thinking of that. He has a book about EMPs, and he also has a solar product, I believe, that is EMP resistant. We got to reach out to him and get him back on the show. And he's the author of the book, The National Family Disaster Preparedness Handbook. I love that one. That was the first book I got. It is comprehensive. It covers every aspect. But yeah, we talk about how important it is and how vulnerable the grid is as well. So the military's warned of an EMP style attack, and a coronal mass ejection that you mentioned, in fact, did happen. I think it might have been in 1859, somewhere thereabouts in the 1850s, and it knocked out all the telegraph systems. Imagine the havoc it could wreak now. And there's, absent everybody having a Faraday cage, the Faraday cage being part of our infrastructure, which it is not, we're going to be vulnerable. So this report from there's a report from the Air Force's Air University. The military warned of an EMP style attack would wipe out the United States, democracy, and the world order. Well, that's quite honestly fine with me. 99 nuclear reactors would likely melt down without electricity to cool them. 4.1 million would be displaced from areas around the nuclear plants as a radioactive cloud spread. Remember Chernobyl. Military and commercial jets, such as those built by Airbus, could be degraded. Alarmingly, aircraft designed to carry large numbers of people and sizable cargo are allowed to operate without certainty about their level of resilience. Bases would be cut off, making defense and counterattacks impossible. Civil unrest would start in hours. Power and GPS could go dark, and EMP would cause instantaneous and simultaneous loss of many technologies reliant on electrical power and computer circuit boards, such as cell phones and GPS devices. You know, the cell phones thing, that brings up another point. I absolutely am a huge fan of ham radio. Even if you do not have a license, if you have one, you can listen, and you can also use them without a license in a case of an emergency. I think if you have family that's scattered around and not easily reachable, I mean, where I am in Utah, even, if my boys are in another part of Salt Lake City, or you know, with their dad, which is on the other side of Salt Lake City, we can't get to each other. You can always communicate and find each other on ham radio. So I love that option. I need to get involved and go back to getting my license. But again, even if you don't have one, get one. It's a great way to have an ear to what's going on. Civil unrest, as I said earlier, would start in hours. Failures could include long-term loss of electrical powers, sewage, freshwater, banking, landlines, cell service, vehicles. 18 months or more are required to replace key elements of the electric grid that would be damaged or knocked out. I mean, imagine that, Jeff, 18 months without any kind of power. How would you get by?
I don't have enough supplies to go 18 months as much as I would like to, but you would have to, at this time of year, we're in a kind of a pickle because we can't really grow anything in our climates. We're both in the middle of winter. We have snow on the ground. The ground's frozen. We're not growing crops. So, you know, we're really limited. So if you don't have it on hand, you're not going to have it to eat.
Yeah.
So,
And even like where I live, I don't know long-term how it would be. It gets very, very cold up here. And I picked a place where there is a steady supply of game. I have a stream behind my house. Lots of food. I've been snowed in here for over a week at a time. And again, that didn't bother me at all. I've got a generator, but you know, this is also where primitive survival skills come in as well. Can you start a fire? What's going to happen when you run out of matches? What's going to happen when your lighters, you know, run out and you don't have those anymore? Can you light a fire on your own? How many means by which do you have to cook and prepare your food? That's something else to think of. So here's some of the advice they give you. Stay away from highly populated areas, urban areas, as much as you can. You need to get out. Do you have a plan? Do you have a means to get to people? Remember, some of these modern cars are going to be, I would say all of them are going to be inoperable if this happens. So stock up on food and water, get to a safe location. Perhaps if you know somebody in a rural area, assuming that you can get to them, make sure that you have supplies already there. One thing that's really annoying, Jeff, is when people say, oh, if it hits the fan, I'm just coming to your house. And I'm like, no, you ain't. People think that they're just going to show up and survive at your house with nothing to contribute. So if you're one of those that needs to go somewhere, I urge you, have something to contribute, be it goods or a skill that they might need, a medical skill, carpentry, electric, anything like that. So have cash on hand. You go farther out, it might actually be good kindling. Become more self-reliant. Jeff, we talk about this all the time. We see people that are absolutely helpless. There was a commercial I saw for frozen food. Somebody was sitting at their work in the lunchroom, and everybody's gathered around this lady who's eating this meal. that they thought maybe she prepared for herself, and the wonderment was, wow, she actually cooked this meal. No surprise, it was actually frozen. But what struck me was the fact that these people thought cooking a meal under conditions where everything's readily available was an unspeakable accomplishment. It's just pathetic how helpless we become and rely on our basic food needs to just be available at any given time. Stock up. Yeah.
Can I just jump in here about this whole self-reliant thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you see the news? It was on last night. I don't know if you watch any national news. I hate to use that word, but there it is. About that lady that had the baby, and she was at one of the social services place. She was trying to find out why she hadn't gotten her benefits yet. So if that tells you what we're talking about here. And there was a big argument over, did the police use excessive force, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to talk about that part of it, but there was a place. She was in a long line of people because they were there about getting their benefits, getting their free handouts. That is where our self-reliance has gone.
Imagine the savagery that's going to happen when these EBT cards no longer work. And these people that live week to week waiting for their food handouts don't get these benefits. Imagine what's going to happen when people who haven't prepared, who are not receiving benefits, can't feed their families. See how friendly your neighbors are when you're eating well and they have nothing. Stock up on battery power, solar charges, power generators, portable battery backups. I have so many means to cook my food. I have camp stoves. We have a generator. I have a wood stove here. I have so many pressure canned goods that I have made on my own that I know I'm going to enjoy. We talk about this all the time. In fact, Michael Meharry and I did a podcast on preparedness for beginners and why people should do it on their Ship Gold. And I think we actually have that on their Radio Co. But I think what we'll do, Jeff, I also want to talk about an article we found on Lou Rockwell. It is called Down with the Presidency. And I was inspired to talk about this article after the death of Pharaoh Bush Sr. So let's take a break. We're going to play a song by Tristan, my friend Tristan Dunn, his band Shooting You Straight. It's a song called Ain't Coming Down. Great song. He's allowed us to play this on our show. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and Pandora. If you're a recording artist also, want to share some of your talent and your songs with us, let us know. Send them over to me, and we'll give a listen and showcase you on our little episodes as well. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Down with the Presidency from Lou Rockwell.
Walked out of the grocery store just the other day. She saw my flag waving in the wind, said, throw that trash away. I said, ma'am, I am a Christian man and I believe American pride. That flag's gonna stay right where it is, and here's my reason why. Granddaddy saw that fellow wood and my uncle had Normandy. And their blood ran through my daddy's veins, and that blood still runs through me. My family's all stood ready when the wolf drowned at the door. So when you curse that flag, you curse their names, to still come back for more. You can say what you want to say, and you can do what you want to do, but I've got the right to wave my flag of freedom, and I don't care how it upsets you. You can scream and cuss, you can make a fuss, you can curse my name all over town, but I'll tell you right now that the flag ain't coming down. No, that flag ain't coming down. they're all red, white, and blue. Red, white. You got that right to express yourself, but I've got that right too. So you can say what you want to say, and you can do what you want to do. But I'm gonna keep on waving my flag of freedom. I don't give a damn just how it offends you. You can scream and cuss. You can make it.
All right, everybody, I want to thank Shooting You Straight. Kristen Dunn, Keep Coming Down. Love that song. Welcome back, everybody. This is the Wasatch Report here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. If you missed the first part of the show, you'll be able to get it later on either YouTube or SoundCloud. We talked about preparedness, and I wanted to bring up an article and that was about bringing down the presidency. As we know, another president has passed away, R.I.P. George H.W. Walker Bush. And Jeff, I'm neutral. I'm not going to speak ill of the dead. I'm certainly not going to honor somebody I found to not be honorable. But let's get to the point. Lou Rockwell wrote an article called Down with the Presidency. And as we know, the presidency and the Supreme Court were not supposed to be as powerful as they are today. In fact, the legislative branch was supposed to be the most powerful branch, and they have abdicated their role time and time again. In fact, our good friend Dwayne Stovall is running for the United States Senate as an independent against John Cornyn in Texas. And I was reading a thread on one of his Facebook posts, and a question was posed to him as follows: will you, as a senator, support the policies of Donald Trump? And his response was, to the point and extent that they are within his lawful powers, yes, meaning constitutional. What we see today is an imperial presidency where every 4 years we vote for the policies of one man or one woman to lead this nation. This is in direct contravention to the founding principles. I want to refer you to a book by Brian McClanahan on that subject, The Founding Fathers' Guide to the Constitution, and he discusses Article 2 and the presidency among the other aspects, but particularly Article 2 is prescient to this discussion right now. It really explains that the president was never intended to have these powers. They were really supposed to just execute the laws that were put in forth, and he signed into law by Congress. So getting to the article, the presidency must be destroyed. Amen. He says it is the primary evil we face, the cause of nearly all our woes, squanders national wealth, starts unjust wars. Remember, Congress has unconstitutionally abdicated its exclusive power to declare war. Look, I refer you to the War Powers Act. It starts unjust wars against foreign peoples that have never done us any harm. It wrecks our families, tramples our rights, invades our communities, spies on our bank accounts, skews the culture towards decadence and trash. It tells lie after lie. And I will say every single one of them. With regards to George H. Walker Bush, let's see. Read my lips. No new taxes. Enough said. Teachers used to tell school kids that anyone can be president. It's like saying anyone can go to hell. It's not an inspiration. It's a threat. The presidency, he continues, is the sum total of American tyranny. The other branches of government, including the presidentially appointed Supreme Court, are mere adjuncts. Again, as I mentioned when I introduced this article, this is not the way it was intended to be. The presidency insists on complete devotion and humble submission to its dictates, even while it steals the products of our labor and drives us to economic ruin, centralizes all power unto itself, the crowds out all competing powers, centers of power in society, including the church, the family, the business, the charity, and the community. Now, Jeff, back when I used to play party favorites and I was squawking about Obama, I realized that these lies are not central to one president. I was also told, you really have to respect the office of the presidency. And I always said, oh, I do. I just don't like the person in there. But, you know, if you look at it now, I don't think the office itself is worthy of respect, judging by the players that have occupied it. And why should we? Why should we respect this when we were seeing this absolute disregard for our freedoms and our constitutional principles? The U.S. presidency, the article continues, is the world's leading evil. We also call the president, by the way, the leader of the free world. Where, Jeff, is the constitutional authority for us to be electing a leader of the free world every 4 years? I don't see it there. He calls it the chief mischief maker in every part of the globe, the leading wrecker of nations, the usurer behind third world debt, the bailer out of corrupt governments. Remember when Obama bailed out the auto workers and we had Trumka on there speaking for, I don't know, a half hour on all the mainstream media networks? The president of an auto workers union absolutely hijacking the mainstream media press because he was favored by a certain president in office. This is crazy. It centralizes power unto itself, crowds out all the competing centers of power in the society, including the church, the family, the charity, and community. The president is called, as I said, the leader of the world's only superpower, the world's indispensable nation, which is reason enough to have him deposed. You know what I wonder, Jeff, is anybody that seeks this role as badly as you have to get it today, I would fear them being in power. I wouldn't trust anybody that's elected as the president. I think you have to be an absolute megalomaniac to seek this position. I want somebody that's a recalcitrant leader that says, oh, I don't think I'm worthy of this position, but I will humbly do my best to serve the public. Jeff, isn't that the kind of person you want? We talk about George Washington as the Cincinnatus. I know we have an issue with him with the Whiskey Rebellion, but these are the people that went back and lived their private lives. Look at Obama. He's doing everything he can to undermine and usurp the accomplishments that President Trump, right or wrong, has been elected to do. These people aren't giving it up. Remember when he said, I am not going to hand over the keys to my house to somebody that's not going to continue my policies. And that's what the deep state is doing. As the presidency, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say that I'm getting I don't know why. Anyway, let's see. Patrick Henry said, your president may easily become a king. And that's exactly what we have. We have an elected king, and that's what I said the other day about in my show about, you know, us celebrating our dearly departed past elected pharaoh, because that's what we raise edifices to them, everything else, and you know they really just don't go away. You know, now we're going to have, you know, the Clintons we'll probably have a Chelsea Clinton running, and I'm sure there'll be another Bush coming. We have royal families, and that's what a lot of the anti-federalists warned us of.
Absolutely. I mean, Alexander Hamilton wanted a president for life, pretty much a king, returning us exactly to the reason why we had a war for independence in the first place. The article continues here. The presidency is presumed to be the embodiment of general will with far more power than any monarch or head of state in pre-modern pre-modern societies. As the presidency assumes more power unto itself, it becomes less and less accountable and even more tyrannical. These days, when we say the federal government, what we really mean is the presidency. When we say national priorities, we really mean what the presidency wants. When we say national culture, we mean what the presidency funds and imposes. He continues, let me be clear, I'm not talking about any particular inhabitant of the White House, and this is what I said earlier. I'm talking about the institution itself and millions of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who are its acolytes. Look at the United States government manual, which breaks down the federal establishment into its three branches. When you actually see is the presidential trunk, the Supreme Court stick, and the congressional twig. Practically everything we think of as federal, save the Library of Congress, operates under the aegis of the executive. This is why governing elites, especially the foreign policy elites, are so intent on maintaining public respect for the office and why they seek to give it the aura of holiness. For example, after Watergate, they briefly panicked and worried that they had gone too far. They might have discredited the democratic autocracy, and to some point, and to that extent they did. But the elites are not stupid. They're careful to insist that Watergate controversy was not about the presidency as such, but only about Nixon, the man. That's why it became necessary to separate the two. You know what? I'm going to open up the article I wrote, Jeff, about Church of the National Government, because this is what we see is this worship of these leaders, whether or not they respected the institution that we consented to, the ratifying states consented to. And I start also in this article, this is published by the 10th Amendment Center as well, and this is called the Church of the National Government. I talk about the Lincoln Memorial. This is one of the clearest examples of not only national government worship, but presidential worship. I've been to the Lincoln Memorial. Everyone stares at the monument, but how many people really understand what the inscription behind this figure of Lincoln says? And I'm going to read it to you. In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever. So when you go and genuflect, drop a knee, and worship the man who destroyed our voluntary Union, as described in Dave Benner's book that I mentioned earlier, this is what we have here. The word temple is illustrative here. I go to dictionary.com and I put the definition right there. An edifice erected as a place of public worship, a church, especially a large or imposing one. That monument applies to all of these principles here. So think about how we look at these presidential figures. And going back to this article now, the presidency recovered the most sacramental character. Also, he cites the Reagan years. For the sake of our liberties, Clinton has revived the great American tradition of scorning tyrants. In some ways, he is the best president a freedom lover can hope for. More well known for his private acts than his public policies. Of course, someday Clinton, too, will ascend to the clouds and enter the pantheon of the great leaders of the free world. As did, remember, now he wasn't a president, but think of the hypocrisy here when Ted Kennedy passed away and he was hailed as a champion of women's rights. Please. Libraries are filled with shelf after shelf of treatises of the American presidency. Save yourself some time and don't bother with them. Amen, Lou Rockwell. All of the same, they all tell the same story, written by liberals or conservatives. They serve up the same identical Whiggish pap. The history of the presidency is this story of a great and glorious institution. It was opposed early on, and viciously so, as you said, Jeff, by the anti-federalists and later even more by the Southern Confederates. Interestingly enough, look now how the Southern Confederacy is absolutely excoriated by the Yankee traditional, now accepted historians, the version that we hear all the time. And this is why I got my first article published. It was in the American Conservative about how the founding generation is merely going to be remembered as slave owners. The part that wasn't included in the article was a discussion I had with the National Park Service guide talking about the Civil War and slavery and how John Brown turned the Civil War. Remind you now, the Civil War hadn't even started, but turned the focus on a war that hadn't even started into one as slavery. Arlington National Park, the bus driver giving the tour called Robert E. Lee a defector. We are seeing these lies about the formation of the Union as a voluntary union. Again, we had a strong president hailed as a hero who saved the Union. I'll remind you, this was absolutely diametrically opposed to the nature of the voluntary union as it was intended to be. Going back to the article here, the office of the presidency has changed, not all in substance, but has grown in stature, responsibility, and importance to fulfill a unique mission on earth. The duties of the office have grown, so has the greatness of the men who inhabit it. Each stands on the shoulders of his forerunners, inspired by their vision and decisiveness, goes on to make his own contribution to the ever-expanding magisterium of presidential laws, executive orders, and national security findings. And then what? How much money is going to be spent on these libraries? How much money is bankrupt Illinois spending on Obama's library? And now I know he was a United States Senator, but Orrin Hatch, who's recently retired, yes, he is raising private money, but so far I think we're looking at a $40 million budget for essentially a temple right on Temple Street, as a matter of fact, for Orrin Hatch. Imagine the good these people could do with this money. Yes, it is private donations, but if you really want to make a difference, do you really want to do it to pay homage to one United States senator? This is absolutely insane. And Jeff, you said this is exactly what they tried to avoid. I sincerely do not trust anybody who seeks to be this powerful. If they want it that bad, you have to ask why. You have any comments on this, Jeff? I know we're going to have to wrap up the show in a few minutes.
No, this is such a good article. I hope people read it. There's just one paragraph. The president can break up businesses, shut down the airlines, void drilling leases, bribe foreign heads of state, or arrest them and try them in kangaroo courts, nationalize land, engage in germ warfare, firebomb crops in Colombia, overthrow any government anywhere, erect tariffs, round up and discredit any public or private assembly it chooses, grabs our guns, tax our income, our inheritance, steal our land, essentially plan the national and world economy, and impose embargoes on anything, anytime. No prince or pope ever had this ability.
Absolutely.
That's a great one. That's all I wanted to say on it.
No, and that's brilliant. And in fact, in the paragraph right above that, Mr. Rockwell explains that the presidency is seemingly bound by law, but in practice can do just about anything it pleases. It can order up troops anywhere in the world. Now, I remember when Mitt Romney was in the presidential debates, and he was being asked about foreign affairs. And he said for his foreign policy, we need to have the military in these places before the trouble starts. Where in the world did we have the temerity to come up with this conclusion that we are the world's police? And where has it gotten us so far? The president can order up troops anywhere in the world, just as Clinton bragged in his acceptance speech at the Democratic convention. Remember Hillary Clinton? We came, we saw, he died, and then she gave her evil cackle. It can plow up a religious community in Texas and bury its members because they got on somebody's nerves at the Justice Department. It can tap our phones, read our mail, watch our bank accounts, and tell us what we can and cannot eat, drink, and smoke. We are now hearing those of us who were absolutely disgusted with Michelle Obama's school lunch program are now cheering on the fact that Trump is fixing it. Can we please get the Oval Office out of our lunches? How about out of our schools altogether? And not only that, where the heck did we come up with this Office of the First Lady? Do you remember that when Trump's wife, Malaya, why am I forgetting her name right now? I shouldn't do this. This is how unimportant these people are to me. Got in an argument with one of Trump's staff members and demanded, it said the headline said the Office of the First Lady demands so-and-so be fired. Who elected her? Did you see her on the ballot, Jeff? I did not.
No, she's not. I mean, I agree. They're unimportant in my life.
We've gone back to having a royal family. Anyway, I also want to refer you, we're going to have to wrap up the show with regards to Kavanaugh. So many conservatives backed Justice Kavanaugh. As we saw, he let us down on a case concerning the Supreme Court and their refusal to hear a Planned Parenthood of Medicaid case. A lot of people are disappointed. I did not like him. People wanted him because he was a Trump appointee, butchering the 10th Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, that's out by the 10th Amendment Center. And lo and behold, we are out of time. We're going to pick up some of this where we left off tomorrow. We're going to hopefully have a Mark and Suzanne show, revolutionizing radio. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you, Jeff, for joining me today as well and helping and doing all you do. This has been the Wasatch Report on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Thank you for listening.